Hello and welcome to Lengold English. Golden Stories, Fluent Future. Our mission is simple: to improve your English and help you discover amazing human stories that will change how you see life. We take difficult topics and make them easy to understand, no matter your English level. We believe that through powerful storytelling, you can improve both your language skills and your thinking. Today, you're not just going to hear a story. You're going to see one of the most amazing changes in modern history. From a baby born without arms and legs, facing a world that seemed impossible, to becoming one of the world's most famous motivational speakers, helping millions of lives around the world. This is the incredible story of Nicholas James Vujicic. Through his story, you will learn how to turn your biggest problems into your strongest points, how to find purpose when life is hard, and how to help others even when you feel broken inside. You'll discover the secret of never giving up and the power of choosing hope instead of sadness. How to speak and understand English better through powerful storytelling while learning life lessons that will stay with you forever. Every word in this story has been carefully chosen to help you improve your vocabulary, understand natural English, and connect with the language. This is not just a story. It's a guide for beating impossible challenges, and your English will get better with every minute you listen. But before we start this incredible journey, let me ask you something that might change how you see your own problems. What would you do if you were born into this world without the things everyone else has? How would you find your purpose when everything seems against you? If this story helps you and improves your English, please think about subscribing to join our group of learners who believe that every story can change lives. When the world seemed impossible. On December 4th, 1982, in Melbourne, Australia, something happened that would change everything we think about human potential. Nicholas James Vujicic was born with a very rare condition. Nick came into this world without arms and legs. He only had a small foot with 2 toes on his left hip. The 1980s were a time when people didn't know much about disabilities. Society didn't understand inclusion very well. Medical professionals had few answers for Nick's parents, Boris and Dushka Vujicic. They were Serbian people who moved to Australia to build a new life. The doctors couldn't explain why this happened. There was no guide for raising a child with such big physical problems. Think about the shock, the fear, and the big questions that filled his parents' minds. Boris was a pastor and accountant. Dushka was a nurse. Suddenly, they found themselves facing something they never could have prepared for. The medical team had no quick solutions, no good statistics, and no promises about what Nick's future might be. But here's where the story becomes special. Instead of giving up to sadness, Nick's parents made a decision that would shape his whole life. They chose to treat him not as a victim, but as their beloved son with unlimited potential. They refused to accept the limits that others tried to put on their child. The early years were full of practical problems that most families never face. How do you feed a baby without arms?
How do you help a small child explore the world without legs? Every simple daily activity needed creative solutions and lots of patience. Nick's parents had to create ways to help him eat, play, and eventually learn to move around. But the physical problems were only part of the struggle. The emotional impact was maybe even more difficult. Nick's parents fought their own feelings of guilt, wondering if they had done something wrong. They faced judgment from strangers, curious stares in public places, and comments from people who didn't understand their situation.
During these early years, Nick began to develop what would become his greatest strength: his mind. He couldn't rely on physical abilities, so he naturally turned to thinking and emotional development. His parents read to him all the time, talked with him, and treated him as an equal part of family life. The lesson here is deep and applies to anyone facing problems. Your situation doesn't decide your worth or your potential. Nick's parents understood that their son's value wasn't measured by what he couldn't do, but by who he was as a person. They saw beyond the disability to the human being with dreams, feelings, and unlimited potential. By age 5, Nick was already showing signs of the amazing spirit that would later inspire millions. He was curious, determined, and surprisingly positive, despite the daily reminders of his physical differences. His parents' decision to focus on possibilities rather than limits was already working. How often do we let our perceived limits define us? Nick's early story teaches us that the way we're treated in our early years, and more importantly, how we choose to see ourselves, shapes our whole future. Your background, your problems, your differences, none of these have to limit your potential unless you let them. By the end of his first years, Nick had learned to move around his house, communicate clearly, and participate in family activities. His parents had created an environment where he felt loved, valued, and capable of achieving anything he set his mind to. The school years. Finding strength through struggle. 1990 to 2000. Learning to live in a world built for others. When Nick reached school age, his parents faced another big decision. Should they put him in a special education program or put him in regular schooling? This choice would decide not just his educational path, but his whole social development and how he saw himself. The early 1990s were a time when inclusive education was still a new idea. Most schools weren't ready with the physical help or the understanding needed to support a student like Nick. But his parents, once again, chose the path of high expectations rather than easy choices. Nick's first day of school was a moment that would test everything his family had built during his early years. Picture a 6-year-old boy with no arms and legs entering a classroom full of children who had never seen anyone like him before. The stares, the whispers, the uncomfortable silence. It was overwhelming. But this is where Nick's story shows its first glimpse of the special character that was developing inside him. Instead of pulling back or becoming angry, he chose curiosity and participation. He wanted to learn, to take part, to be part of the classroom community despite the obvious problems. The practical parts of school life needed constant creativity and adaptation. Nick learned to write by holding a pen between his toes. He developed ways of turning pages, carrying books, and participating in classroom activities. Each small victory was a building block toward independence and self-confidence. However, the social problems were often more difficult than the academic ones. Children can be both very accepting and accidentally cruel. Nick faced his share of teasing, exclusion, and misunderstanding. There were days when he came home asking why he was different, why life had to be so much harder for him than everyone else. The middle school years brought new levels of difficulty. Being a teenager is hard for everyone, but imagine going through puberty, trying to fit in, and dealing with romantic feelings when your physical appearance makes you so different. These were the years when Nick faced his darkest moments, including thoughts of suicide. At age 10, Nick tried to end his life by drowning himself in his family's bathtub. The weight of feeling different, of facing constant stares and questions, of wondering if life would always be this difficult, it all became too much. But something stopped him in that moment. Later he would say it was thinking about his parents and the pain his death would cause them. This near tragedy became a turning point. Nick realized that his life had value not just to himself, but to the people who loved him. He began to understand that his struggles might have a purpose, that maybe his experiences could help others facing their own problems. During his teenage years, Nick discovered something that would become central to his future mission: his ability to inspire others. When he shared his story with classmates, when he talked about his struggles and his determination to overcome them, people listened. They were moved. They saw their own problems in a new light. Nick's school performance throughout these years was excellent. He couldn't rely on physical abilities, so he developed his thinking capabilities to their fullest potential. He was great at mathematics, accounting, and financial planning. His teachers recognized that his mind was his greatest asset, and they encouraged him to pursue higher education. Your greatest struggles often show your greatest strengths. Nick's physical limits forced him to develop mental, emotional, and social skills that many people with all their physical abilities never develop. His problems became the foundation of his unique gifts. By the end of his school years, Nick had changed from a boy struggling to find his place in the world to a young man beginning to understand his unique purpose. We all have periods in our lives when we feel different, left out, or not good enough. Nick's school years teach us that these difficult periods often contain the seeds of our greatest achievements. The very things that make you feel different might be the keys to your unique contribution to the world. When limits become launching pads. As Nick became a young adult, he made decisions that would seem impossible to most people. Instead of accepting a quiet, protected life, he chose to do activities that seemed designed for people with arms and legs. This wasn't being careless. It was a deliberate choice to test what was possible. The early 2000s were a time of growing awareness about disability rights and inclusion, but practical opportunities were still limited. Nick could have easily accepted a normal path, maybe working in an office job, living a comfortable but ordinary life. Instead, he chose to challenge every assumption about what someone with his condition could achieve. One of his first breakthrough moments came through sports. Nick learned to swim, not just to stay above water, but to swim competitively. Think about the determination needed to move yourself through water using only the power from your body and one small foot. He developed his own technique, using his body like a dolphin, creating powerful wave movements that allowed him to move well through the water. But swimming was just the beginning. Nick took up surfing, learning to balance on a surfboard despite having no arms for balance and no legs for steering. The first time he caught a wave was more than a personal victory. It was a statement to the world that limits exist mainly in our minds. He also played golf, developing a unique swing that created surprising power and accuracy. He learned to play drums, creating rhythms that amazed audiences. Each new activity he mastered sent a clear message. Physical problems don't have to limit human potential. During this period, Nick also began his speaking career, though it started almost by accident. In 2003, he was invited to speak to a small group at his local church about overcoming problems. Standing in front of that first audience, Nick discovered something amazing. His story had power. People weren't just politely listening, they were really inspired and changed by what they heard. Word began to spread about the young man without arms and legs who could make people laugh, cry, and most importantly, believe in themselves. Invitations to speak began coming from schools, churches, and community organizations. Nick realized he had found his calling. But building a speaking career wasn't easy. In the early days, he faced rejection after rejection. Event organizers worried that audiences would be uncomfortable or that his appearance would be too distracting. Some people couldn't see past his disability to recognize the powerful message he carried. Nick continued because he had discovered something deep. When you change your pain into purpose, you become unstoppable. Every rejection taught him to improve his message. Every successful presentation built his confidence and expanded his reach. By 2005, Nick had started Life Without Limbs, his nonprofit organization dedicated to sharing hope and inspiration with people facing life's problems. He began traveling internationally, speaking to audiences in dozens of countries. His message was universal, that every person has value, that problems can be overcome, and that life always has meaning. The change in Nick during this decade was amazing. The boy who once considered ending his life had become a man dedicated to helping others find reasons to live. The teenager who felt left out and different had become someone who helped others celebrate their uniqueness. His speaking style was uniquely his own, part motivational speaker, part comedian, part philosopher. He could make audiences laugh at his self-making fun humor one moment and move them to tears with his deep insights the next. His physical presence on stage was commanding despite his lack of normal height. Your greatest weaknesses can become your most powerful strengths when you're willing to be open and real. Nick's physical problems, which could have been sources of shame, became the foundation of his credibility and influence. By 2010, Nick was speaking to hundreds of thousands of people every year. His message had reached every continent, and his influence was growing fast. He had proven that a person's impact on the world isn't measured by the physical capabilities, but by the size of their heart and the strength of their determination. What activities have you avoided because you thought you couldn't succeed at them? What dreams have you given up because they seemed too difficult? Nick's journey during this decade teaches us that most limits are self-imposed, and that breakthrough often comes when we're willing to attempt what seems impossible. Part 4. Love, Family, and Global Impact. The Complete Man, 2010 to present. When Dreams Become Reality. By 2010, Nick had achieved amazing success as a motivational speaker, but there was still something missing in his life that he deeply wanted: love and family. Many people with disabilities struggle with questions about whether they'll ever find romantic love, whether someone could see past their problems to love them completely. Nick had experienced heartbreak in previous relationships. Some women couldn't handle the practical problems of being with someone with his condition. Others were attracted to his fame, but not prepared for the reality of his daily life. There were moments when he wondered if he was meant to inspire others while staying alone himself. But in 2010, Nick's life changed forever when he met Kanae Miyahara, a Japanese woman living in Texas. Their meeting wasn't dramatic or movie-like. It was beautifully ordinary. They were introduced by a mutual friend, and what began as friendship slowly developed into something deeper. Kanae saw Nick not as a disabled person or a famous speaker, but simply as a man with a beautiful heart and incredible spirit. She was drawn to his humor, his faith, his passion for life, and his genuine care for others. For the first time in his life, Nick felt loved not despite his condition, but as a complete person. Their dating faced unique problems. How do you hold hands when one person doesn't have hands? How do you navigate physical closeness with such big differences? But love found a way, as it always does when it's genuine. They developed their own language of affection, their own ways of expressing tenderness and connection. On February 12, 2012, Nick and Kanae were married in a beautiful ceremony that was both a personal celebration and a powerful statement to the world. Their wedding photos showed a bride and groom radiating pure joy, challenging every assumption about what love looks like. But their story was just beginning. In 2013, their first son, Kiyoshi, was born, healthy and complete with all his limbs. Think about Nick's emotions as he held his son for the first time. Here was living proof that his condition wouldn't prevent him from creating new life, from being a father, from passing on his values to the next generation. Their second son, Dijon, was born in 2015, followed by twin daughters Olivia and Ellie in 2017. Nick went from being a single man wondering if he'd ever have a family to being the father of 4 children who see him not as disabled, but simply as Daddy. Watching Nick interact with his children is amazing. He may not be able to pick them up in the traditional way, but he finds creative ways to play with them, to comfort them, to be present in their lives. His children are growing up understanding that love isn't about physical capabilities, it's about presence, attention, and care. During this period, Nick's global influence continued to grow fast. His organization, Life Without Limbs, has reached over 600 million people worldwide. He's spoken in over 60 countries, addressing audiences ranging from school children to business executives to government leaders. His books, including Life Without Limits and Unstoppable, have become international bestsellers, translated into dozens of languages. His story has been featured in countless documentaries, news programs, and magazines. He has become one of the most recognizable motivational speakers in the world. But maybe more importantly, Nick has grown in his understanding of his own purpose. Early in his career, his message was mainly about overcoming disability. Now his message has expanded to include universal human experiences, finding purpose, dealing with failure, building relationships, keeping hope, and living with gratitude. Nick's self-perception has gone through a complete change. The boy who once saw himself as broken and incomplete now sees himself as uniquely designed for his specific purpose. He often says that he wouldn't change his condition if he could, because it has allowed him to impact lives in ways that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. His daily routine shows remarkable adaptability and independence. He travels extensively, manages multiple businesses, writes books, records videos, and maintains an active social media presence that reaches millions of followers. He has proven that with creativity, determination, and the right support systems, there are very few things that are truly impossible. Your completeness as a human being isn't determined by what you have, but by what you give. Nick found wholeness not when his circumstances changed, but when he fully embraced his purpose and opened his heart to love and service. Nick's complete life story shows us that happiness and fulfillment come not from having a perfect life, but from fully embracing the life you have. His journey from despair to joy, from isolation to love, from self-pity to service, provides a guide for anyone wanting to change their own problems into victories. Today, Nick continues to travel the world, sharing his message of hope and possibility. He has proven that physical limitations don't define a person's potential, that love can overcome any obstacle, and that every life has the power to make a difference in the world.
If you watched this entire video, I want you to know something very important about the story you just heard and about yourself. You are not your limitations. You are not your past mistakes, your current struggles, or your perceived problems. You are, just like Nick Vujicic, a person with unlimited potential waiting to be released. Nick's story isn't just about overcoming physical problems. It's about the power of the human spirit to go beyond any obstacle. What can we learn from Nick's incredible journey? First, that our greatest problems often become our greatest strengths when we choose to embrace them rather than hide from them. Second, that love and acceptance, both from others and from ourselves, can heal wounds we thought were permanent. Third, that our purpose in life often comes from our pain, and our ability to help others grows directly from our own struggles. Nick discovered that he wasn't born without limbs by accident or as punishment, but as preparation for a unique mission that only he could fulfill. In the same way, your problems, your differences, your struggles, they're not obstacles to your purpose. They might be the very foundation of it. From today, I want you to say, I am not limited by what I don't have. I am empowered by what I can give. My problems are not my chains. They are my launching pad to help others fly. If this story has inspired you to see your own life differently, if it's helped you improve your English while learning valuable life lessons, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, Leave a comment sharing how Nick's story has impacted you, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Together, we can change lives through the power of storytelling. Remember Nick's most powerful truth. You are not your circumstances. You are not your past. You are your choices, your character, and your capacity to love and serve others. You are not your limitations. You are your limitless potential.